Hello, welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we are reviewing All of Us Strangers. Written and directed by Andrew Haigh, All of Us Strangers follows Adam, played by Andrew Scott, who has a chance encounter with a mysterious neighbor, Harry, played by Paul Mescal. As a relationship develops between them, Adam is preoccupied with memories of the past and finds himself drawn back to the suburban town where he grew up and the childhood home where his parents appear to be living, just as they were the day they died, 30 years before. So Jeffrey, what did you think about All of Us Strangers?
Andrew Haigh has a lot going for him in terms of a reputation. He made a film called Weekend that I think both the film community and the queer community kind of thinks is a masterpiece, and perhaps one of the best queer films made in, the past 10 or 20 years. From there, he made a film called 45 Years, which I'm a giant fan of. I think that movie is fantastic. It was Oscar nominated, and he also made a film called Lean on Pete. As a director and as a writer, he always benefits from having this very subtle sensitivity to his characters. His films are very emotional, but they're always under the surface. You can feel it more in characters' faces and in the way they act with other people, in their interactions with other people. His films are really interesting to interpret, but again, they always have sensitivity at the core that I think is his main strong suit. In All of Us Strangers, I think that the sensitivity maybe got the best of him. This is a film that is much more outwardly emotional than anything I've seen from him before. Sometimes that works to its benefit. This is a film that I was really on its wavelength for, I would say, about 45 minutes of an hour and 50-minute runtime, and then it slowly starts to dissipate. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that, and we could talk about them one by one as we go through the review, but overall, I just found the film a bit too schmaltzy and dramatic, and I feel bad saying that because I know that there are a lot of people who are very touched by this film, and being touched by independent cinema, by great filmmakers, is something I am very pro, so if this is a film that touched you, I'm not coming after you. I think that's a wonderful thing, genuinely. But I don't think it quite landed for me in that way. And then the second main issue I have with the film is I think that its fantasy dream logic is something that I just never really tapped into. And I'm not saying that the film needs to explain itself exactly, but I never quite knew if he was dreaming or if this was supposed to be an outright fantasy or exactly what the rules of this world were. And perhaps it's my own negligence that I just got too caught up in the logistics of that to really get engrossed in the film.
Interestingly enough, I think I was one of those people that felt very emotionally touched by this movie. I'm also very confused because this movie did fall apart for me towards the end as well. I feel like I had this weird connection to the movie where there were moments that made me tear in the theater. I was crying for some of these particular emotional moments, and then there was other moments that I was completely scratching my head, and not in a confused way, but rather just like, why did they do that? And I do want to get into that. We'll get into a spoiler section dealing with a lot of those things because I think there's some spoilers attached to what I have to say about that. But I do want to get back a little bit to this almost wish fulfillment that you were talking about. This film does deal a lot in the conversations you wish you had, especially with your parents when you were in the closet. Just like we mentioned in the plot at the beginning of this review, Andrew Scott, who plays Adam, he is going back and forth from what seemingly is reality to the past where he sees his parents who are already deceased. I thought the conversations between him and his dad played by Jamie Bell, and his mom played by Claire Foy, I thought these were some of the best emotional moments of the film. There are also some wonderful emotional moments with Paul Mescal. He plays Harry in the movie, the love interest, you could say, that he comes across with one night in his apartment. So like you were saying earlier, this film is really about these relationships. It's really about the emotional connection and the interactions between these characters.
And that's where I think the film is relatable. Certainly this is a queer film. It's a film about coming out and the things that you wish you could have said to your parents as a queer person. But I think that this is relatable to anything you wish you said to parents or relatives that are no longer here. It's a film that's very universal, I think, in that longing. I agree with you that some of the scenes, especially early on with his parents, are some of the strong points of the film. I think the scene in the living room with Jamie Bell, his dad, is maybe one of the best scenes in the movie. One detail that I really like about that, and I'm not sure if it's a symbolic detail or if it gives us a clue to the logic of this fantasy world that he's in, but he always sees himself as the boy in the mirror. He sees himself as a little kid. So he's not seeing himself as he is today. He's seeing himself as he was in the past, which that could be an interesting metaphor because that little boy is still within him. There's this great scene with Paul Mescal talking about being on the edge of your family and like the hurt and raw skin, how easily you can go back to feeling like the black sheep of your family with just a word, with just a simple way that someone treats you. So I found that really touching and really relatable in a certain way. I think that scene could show how the little boy is still within him, that it only takes a couple of words for him to feel like that little boy again. So I really like that symbolism. The other side of the coin, where it's a clue to the fantasy world, I don't know, that doesn't really work for me. I think to some degree the film being wish fulfillment is admirable, and that's something that all of us as writers I think would do to some degree. We write fantasy worlds we wish we could go to. We write conversations that we wish we had. I don't know if that quite works for this film because so much about it is so positive that these conversations tend to go in a direction that you want them to go. And maybe that's a comment on the film itself and what the film is trying to tell you about your memories and about how we kind of contort our memories in order to fit into a framework that we can most accept. I did find the wish fulfillment to be a bit much, especially in the final stretches.
Yeah, I completely agree with those types of conversations, though. I think any queer person could relate to them. I related so hard to what would you say to the parents should they still be around. I think about my grandma in that case, like what she would have said to me, how she would have reacted. A lot of the wish fulfillment in this movie is actually them saying the right thing, the things that you wish you would have heard. And so I related a lot to that. I do want to get back to the relationship that Andrew Scott has with Jamie Bell, his dad in the movie, because those were also some of the most funniest moments. When you're talking about how he comes back as a child, there's some really funny moments where he's like wearing his child clothes, like he's in pajamas, like a onesie.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That actually reminded me of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind in some of those scenes. Yeah.
And there's another time where he walks into his childhood bedroom and he's looking at all the things on his shelves and things that he liked. It really was an opening of your mind of just how it used to be back then. Mm-hmm. It reminded me of how so many of these emotional elements from our childhood never really leave us. Mm-hmm. They just are something we grow up and we sort of throw aside in the back of our mind for a little bit. But I think so many of those overwhelming thoughts and feelings, they still exist. And I love that this movie explores a lot of those things. There is this transition that happens between going from the seeming reality to the past with his parents that did not work for me. Mm-hmm. I didn't really like the train sequences that transition the scenes. I thought they were overused and overplayed, overdramatic, and a little bit cheesy.
Reminds you of it like a children's book or something.
I felt they kind of cheapened the movie in a little bit.
Like in Narnia, how they have to go in the closet to get to Narnia. Like some sort of like weird fantasy thing.
That's different for me. I love that movie. And I love those transitions.
I'm not going to talk about that. But I'm just talking. I'm just saying, trying to make an example.
I know what you mean, yeah.
And I think speaking of cheapening, a lot of the emotional license that the film takes early on, I think benefits from being quite subtle. Kind of like I was talking about with Andrew Haigh's films in general. They're a lot more kind of quietly wistful and tender. Everything is below the surface. And there is like this gradual decline where this film becomes like an outright weepy towards the end. Did not work for me. It worked for plenty of people in our theater who were like weeping. And genuinely, that's a good thing if you were touched by it. Maybe it's a deficiency within me. Maybe it's something within the film that if you're heightening all of those emotions so much, I'm just going to naturally react against it because I'm not feeling the same way that those characters are. So the film really started to lose me as it lost its wistfulness and got more into like a sledgehammering type territory with its emotions. And it felt the need to explain every little thing that the characters were feeling and have these long, drawn-out, very dramatic scenes of people just crying.
So I do want to go back to Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal, as their roles, I felt in the movie, really elevated the material of the film, even though so much of it didn't really land for me. I thought their acting was brilliant. I thought they had great chemistry on screen. I love the way that Paul Mescal's character was really helping change Andrew Scott's character for the better. He was starting to learn and grow, I think, from their experiences together. And I guess this is something that the end of the movie I feel puts a little ratchet in, but at the same time, I guess that doesn't mean it isn't happening within his character, Andrew Scott's character. So I do want to talk about that more detailed down the line when we get into the spoiler section, but it's in a non-spoiler way. That's what I'm going to say about that for now.
I agree with you that I think all four of the performances are terrific in this film, especially Andrew Scott. You know, I would single him out as if he could possibly get Oscar nominated, I would say that's very deserved. At the times that the writing was not working for me, the acting almost always was, even when I was identifying things that seemed over dramatized to me or where the emotional connectivity was not working between me and the screen. I always thought the actors were really trying to sell the material as best that they could.
All right, so I think it's time that we get into spoilers finally. So if you haven't seen All of Us Strangers, I do recommend watching it. Something about it is very healing for queer people. Being able to see these conversations as wish fulfillment, which I'm going to have a little bit more to say in just a moment, I think is very healing, or it just helped me in a way that I think a lot of queer movies haven't done before.
I definitely identified with a lot of those stretches, and I found it to be uniquely astute about certain things that only queer people go through. For that alone, I guess it is worth seeing. Again, I think ultimately that the film doesn't work that well, but there are great things about it.
All right, so if you have not seen All of Us Strangers, this is the time to leave if you don't want to be spoiled, because I'm about to drop a big spoiler. And here we go, because at the end of the movie, we find out Paul Mescal is dead. This was a big 180 from the beginning of the movie. Sadly, I thought it destroyed a lot of what came before it in terms of their relationship with Andrew Scott.
I agree.
I thought it was way too pessimistic. I thought there was enough pessimism built into the film with his parents being dead and him having to deal with the gravity of that. Tacking on this extra layer of trauma at the end of the movie, I think did a great disservice to the beginning of it.
From that event, I'm not really sure what theme we're supposed to take from it. All of the themes I'm coming up with, I don't really like and I don't find very helpful. So I find that choice in the movie, this is a harsh word, but I find it a little manipulative. I think the film sets you up in a certain way for Paul Mescal to be a saving grace, and then it takes a little bit too much pride in like taking that from under you. So I just didn't enjoy that. I think it would have been a much more powerful film if he had lived and it showed that you can find your own family and you can find people who are really meaningful to you, because Andrew Scott is essentially alone as this film ends. So I'm not sure what we're supposed to derive from that. Usually people that end up alone at the end of films, it's because they did something wrong. I don't know. It just didn't work for me. I don't think that the character deserved that sort of treatment. And again, I'm not sure what we're supposed to derive from it.
But I like what you were just saying. Like, I thought it was a building of a new family, people that you could connect with that could help you grow and learn in a way that maybe you missed out earlier on in your life. Thematically, I don't know where it was going with that.
The theme I can derive from that is you don't have your blood family and you don't have your new family either, which I don't like, and I don't think is a very positive message to be telling your audience. I'm positive that Andrew Haigh didn't mean it that way, but that is how it came across to me.
And going on top of that, there's a final moment in this movie where they are cuddled on the bed together and the camera's coming away from them. There's a specific song, there's like a track that plays during that scene.
Yeah. Sorry, we saw this movie a month ago. I forgot about that too.
This song is very much too on the nose for me.
Yeah. I remember walking out of the theater and thinking the exact same thing that you did.
And I think that enhanced the weirdness of it all.
I think it's a classic case of using vagueness instead of ambiguity.
Yes, that's actually a great way to say that. With that said, the music and the score throughout the movie, I really did enjoy. There was a lot of bops throughout this film that really landed with me up until that last one, which I thought was too on the nose. But the rest were hits, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. Isn't there a record he plays with his dad that I think is perfectly on point?
I literally want to get the soundtrack to this movie.
So you ready to go to grades?
Yes, I give All of Us Strangers a C+. And you know what? I really wanted to like this movie, and I wish I could give it a higher grade. I do think some of the best scenes of the year, in my opinion, were in this movie.
Oddly, yeah.
Yes, there were some scenes that were downright hilarious and very emotionally overwhelming for me, and I cried in the theater just like a lot of other people. I think anytime you could connect to a film and relate to it on such a deep, intimate level, A+ for that. But I feel like the end just really destroyed a lot of what I thought it had going for it in a way that just didn't, I don't know, I didn't get. And so it just took the movie down for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. I'm giving it a C. I think that it squanders a lot of goodwill that it builds up in its first 45 minutes. And so much of that first 45 minutes is so good and so healing. You feel that warmth and melancholy that I very rarely feel in films when you're watching it. And it just quietly squanders it as the film goes forward. I know I said this a bunch of times. I just found it a bit too overdramatic. And when something is going for such a large emotion in that way, and you don't feel that large emotion with the characters, I think it really heightens the disconnect that you have with the screen. This is a director I really respect. And this is the first film of his I haven't liked very much, or I haven't recommended. Anyhow, I hope better things ahead for Andrew Haigh. He's a great director.
All right, and that's it for our review of All of Us Strangers. All of Us Strangers is in theaters December 22nd, so go check it out. If you've seen All of Us Strangers, let us know in the comments, what did you think about the film? As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.